Well, hey there. Thank you so much for joining our online service today. My name is Young, and I have the joy and privilege of being the MSU venue director and leading the MSU venue here at Riv. As we get started with our service today, I want to actually point you to rivchurch.com/live. On that webpage, you can find a myriad of different ways to get connected with our church family, whether that is submitting prayer requests and knowing that there's a church family praying for you, or if you have any kiddos at home. And you can find Riv Kids material there as well, along with following along with the message and our service today on rivchurch.com/live. Like I said, I get to lead the MSU venue, and I'm super excited to announce that after a year and a half hiatus from having our very own weekend service, the MSU venue is relaunching this fall. The last time we had a service was back in March of 2020. So again, a year and a half hiatus. We are relaunching this fall on Sunday, August 29th at 11:30 a.m. at Erickson Hall Kiva, which is located on Central Campus at Michigan State University's campus. And I want to emphasize Erickson Hall Kiva because for the last 3 years, we've been meeting within the MSU Union Ballroom, and we have decided to make this shift for this school year to the Erickson Hall Kiva because of its amazing location. Again, we are relaunching the service Sunday, August 29th, 11:30 a.m. at the Erickson Hall Kiva. I'm super excited for this upcoming school year. My staff team and I, we've been itching to get back into just on-campus ministry work. Our vision for this year, one of the main reasons why we're so excited is that this upcoming school year, we've been kind of talking with other people, and we've recognized that there are technically 2 incoming freshman classes coming into this school year. We always have the actual freshmen that are, that have just graduated from high school going into their first year of college, and also last year's freshmen who are rising sophomores who did not get a full on-campus college experience are, in a sense, having their first year of being on campus this year. And so what that means for us as a church family, it means that there is a huge amount of students that we want to welcome into our church family to share the gospel with, and to again, bring them into our church family. And we're excited because within this upcoming school year, we have a variety of different groups that will get started within the MSU venue, along with a bunch of different events that we're super excited to have, again, to bring people in so that they can be seen and heard, because this last year and a half has been such a mess, and a lot of people have just been hiding in their rooms and whatnot. And so we're super pumped for this school year. If you yourself are a college student and going to MSU or LCC, this announcement is for you. And if you also know anyone who's about to enter into college at MSU or LCC, whether they're a freshman, sophomore, junior, or senior, you can go to rivchurch.com/MSU for more information, to get connected with our church family. And if you'd like to even step in and serve and volunteer at any capacity, you can go to rivchurch.com/MSU, and you can get involved with our church family for this upcoming school year. Again, our first weekend service launch is Sunday, August 29th at 11:30 a.m. At the Erickson Hall Kiva. So with all that being said, I'm excited to announce and to invite and welcome our band, the Royal We, who's going to be leading us in worship through song today.
All right, thanks. Hi, Riv. How's it going? My name is Alan. We have Dan and Dewey here, and we are the band, the Royal We. If you're familiar with our band at all, if you've seen us play before, you'll notice today we have Dewey on his native instrument of saxophone instead of drums like normal. He recently injured his knee mountain biking, and so he's off drums for a little bit. I don't say that to drum up sympathy. Nailed it. But I say that because we have an awesome opportunity to illustrate that regardless of the instrumentation that's on stage, regardless of who's up here, of whether you're here in person or watching online, we get to take this time to worship the God of the universe through song. So that's really awesome, and let's start that now. and tune my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise, and teach me some melodious sonnet sung by flaming tongues above, and praise the mount I'm fixed upon it, the mount of thy redeeming love. Here I raise my Ebenezer, hither by thy help I've come, and I hope by thy good pleasure safely to arrive at home. As Jesus sought me when a stranger, wandering from the fold of God, he to rescue me from danger interposed his precious blood. How great a debtor daily I'm constrained to be. Let thy goodness like a fetter bind my wandering heart to thee. And prone to wander, Lord, I feel it, prone to leave the God I love. And here's my heart, oh, take and seal it for thy courts above. Prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, oh, take and seal it for thy courts above. World has known, where faithful ones from every tongue will come. Before the sun will stand, made faultless through the land. Believing hearts find promise, grace, and love. Hear heaven's voices sing, hear the anthems ring through emerald courts and sapphire skies. Oh, glory, wisdom, power, strength, and honor perfect song and praise. He'll wipe each tear-stained eye as thirst and hunger die. The Lamb becomes our shepherd king. Hear heaven's voices sing, hear the anthems ring through emerald courts and sapphire skies. Oh, glory, wisdom, power, strength and honor, all to God our King who reigns on high forevermore. Jesus, Savior, Christ, my King, and all my life is solely for you. Jesus, Savior, Christ, my King, and all my life is solely for your glory. Your glory. Your There is a higher throne than all this world has known, where faithful ones from every tongue will come. Before the sun will stand, made faultless through the Lamb, believing hearts find promise, grace, and love. God, we thank you for that grace. We thank you for that love, Lord. I thank you that we can come here, even though we're scattered throughout our world, Lord. I thank you that we're still a community in you. Thank you that we can take this time to hear the words that you have for us, and we pray that you would open our ears and our heart to whatever you would have us receive. We love you, God. We pray this all in your name. Amen.
Well, how's it going, Riv? My name is Tony. I am one of the pastors here, and in my pastoral role, my primary ministry work is I am the Westside Venue Director. So while I'm here today with you online, you can usually find me over at the Westside. So I was driving down the road recently, and I saw a car that looked like this. Have you ever seen a car that looked like that? I love finding these cars on the road. It's just whenever it happens, if they're stopped at a stoplight, I'll try and get close and just read all the bumper stickers on their car. And I like doing that because it gives me a picture of who's behind the wheel. Right? You get to know a lot about them, what they believe, what music they listen to, who they voted for, where they buy their groceries, like all that stuff. And you get to know that because this person, they've chosen to communicate that to you very loudly and colorfully with their car. My wife, Danielle, and I, we recently bought a minivan. And TJ, friend of ours and the director of student ministries here at Riv, he sent me a video of a minivan on the road that had this sticker on the back. Now, When I see that, I just think TJ's jealous that I have 47 cup holders and he doesn't. But, as I was preparing this sermon this week, I got to thinking about that bumper sticker covered car that I saw on the road. And I realized that even though my car and your car may not be covered with stickers, we all have convictions. We have opinions. We have things that we believe that are unique to us. And all of those beliefs, they inform our decisions. How we live, where we live, who we spend our time with. And all of those beliefs and all those convictions, they put us in camps or tribes with other people who are similar to us. People who, in a sense, have the same bumper stickers on the car that we do. And even though I may not know you, I can guarantee that I can identify at least two groups that exist in your life. You ready? Us and them. Us in them. You have an us in your life, but you also have a them in your life as well. Us are the people that are like you. They think like you, they vote like you, they often look like you, they have the same values and the same convictions that you do. We often describe those people as my people. They just get me. But them are the opposite. These are people in your life, interpersonally or digitally, that are not like you. People you don't agree with, people who didn't vote like you did. Maybe they don't look like you. Maybe they live in ways that you just flat out 100% disagree with. Over the past year, I feel like we've kind of separated ourselves into more of these camps than I can ever remember. Politically, we've done so medically, we've done so culturally. Now, as Christians, it's a really good thing for us to have community, right? To do life with other believers. That's a really important part of our faith. We see that throughout the scriptures. But the question is what is our posture toward the thems in our lives? People who are different than we are. We're in this series here at Riv that we're calling Jesus and the. And what we're doing is we're looking at interactions that Jesus had with various people throughout the gospel accounts. And today, we're going to find Jesus spending time with a really questionable group of people. And in that, we're going to see how Jesus responds to this question that he gets. Why are you spending time with them? So if you have a Bible with you, near you, feel free to open up to Luke chapter 5. That's where we're going to be. We're going to be starting in verse 27. And as you flip or tap there, I'm just going to give us a little bit of what's already happened in Luke chapter 5. So in this chapter, Jesus had really begun his public ministry, and there was a lot going on. In less than 30 verses, Jesus calls the first disciples. He heals a man of his leprosy, and then he healed a paralytic man who had been lowered down through the roof by 4 of his friends. It's this crazy scene. They can't get in the house that Jesus is, so they lower him through the roof. And Jesus heals him, and then he tells him 2 things. He says, pick up your mat and go home, and your sins are forgiven. There's a bunch of Pharisees and scribes there that day when this happens, and these were the Jewish religious leaders of the day, and they were livid. Not at what Jesus did, but at what he said. Because to say that your sins were forgiven, that's a big deal because only God could forgive sins. But Jesus tells this man that, and this man who was once paralyzed, he gets up, he picks up his mat and he walks out of the room, and everyone is just in awe. All this happens in the first 26 verses of chapter 5. And from this interaction in the very next verse, that is where we find ourselves today. So Luke chapter 5, starting in verse 27. After this, that amazing healing, Jesus went out and he saw a tax collector named Levi sitting at the tax office, and he said to him, "Follow me." So right after this incredible moment, Jesus walks out of the house and he sees a tax collector named Levi, and he's just sitting at his place of employment. And it's really important to realize that this detail is highlighted here, that Levi was a tax collector. Throughout history, tax collectors, they've never been the good guys, okay? They're never the protagonists in the story. Even today, when we think about taxes and we think about the IRS, like none of us are feeling all warm and cozy when we talk about that. Do you remember the famous quote of Benjamin Franklin? In this world, nothing can be certain except death and taxes. But tax collectors in the first century, they were especially scorned for a few reasons. First was they worked for the oppressive regime of the Roman Empire. Israel in the time of Jesus was occupied by Rome. Jerusalem had been overtaken about 90 years earlier by General Pompey in 63 BC. And ever since then, the Romans, they were really in charge. Everywhere the Jews looked, they saw Rome. They saw influence and they saw oppression. And at that time, Caesar had even installed a king of the Jews. This was Herod, to rule. And as he ruled, the Romans, they built up all these imperial temples, all of these fortresses to reinforce their control of that area. And guess who got to pay for all that Roman architecture? It was the Jews, with the huge taxes that they paid. Heavy taxation was one of the primary ways that Rome was able to continue their rule. And if that wasn't bad enough, those weren't the only taxes the Jewish people paid. Along with those Roman taxes, they still paid the temple taxes, the tithes and the sacrifices. That was part of the law that they followed. So can you imagine being a first century Jew in that dilemma? Here you're paying a lot of taxes to Rome, who are building these things that are encouraging the worship of false gods. And then over here, you're paying taxes to the temple of the God that you worship. What this resulted in was a lot of Jewish people, they lived in poverty, just to how much money they paid in taxes. So Jesus walks by and he sees this guy named Levi, and his job was, he was a tax collector. He collected all this money for the Romans. That's really the first reason why they were so scorned. But the second reason was that tax collectors were Jewish themselves. These tax collectors weren't Roman. They were fellow Jewish people taking money from their countrymen for Rome. Now, if you think about it, this is a pretty brilliant move of the Roman Empire, right? Like, why would we further the Jews' hatred of us? So why don't we just hire their friends and their neighbors to do our dirty work? And that's what they did. What this resulted in was that tax collectors, they were seen as traitors. They were helping the enemy. One commentary I read this week likened them to the social equivalent of corrupt snoops and informants. They were supporting the oppression that they and their families and friends were experiencing. But the final reason that no one liked tax collectors was that they were usually pretty dishonest. Roman officials would tell them how much to collect, but they didn't care how the tax collectors did it or how much they took. So for example, if the Roman government had said, hey, this person owes $100, a tax collector could go up to that person and say, hey, you owe the Roman government $150. They'd take the 100, give it to Rome, and then they'd pocket the 50. Rome didn't care as long as they were getting their cut. So tax collectors really had free reign on acquiring this wealth in a dishonest way by cheating their own people. And that's often what tax collectors would do. So this is a picture of who Jesus is walking by that day. A man that the Jews had identified as a traitor, a dishonest, conniving supporter of Rome, which was the greatest oppressor of the Jews during that time. Did you catch what Jesus said to Levi when he walked by? He didn't say, how could you do this job? What are you doing? Do you realize who you work for? No, Jesus walks by Levi and he says two words, follow me. To really get the weight of what Jesus is saying, we need to understand the first century context again. This wasn't Jesus just asking Levi to take a walk with him. No, this is a much bigger deal than that. Those two words, follow me, were an invitation. Because Jesus was a rabbi. He was a teacher. And rabbis, they had disciples, or they had followers. And disciples, what they did was they spent time following a rabbi or a teacher. And they were invited to do that. Not everyone could get this invitation. It had to come from the rabbi himself. So in that moment, Jesus is asking Levi, a tax collector, to leave everything and to take on a new identity as one of his disciples. What does he say? Well, we see his answer in the very next verse, verse 28. So, leaving everything behind, Levi got up and he began to follow him. Levi says yes. The text says he leaves everything behind. There is something about Jesus, something compelling, something that drew Levi in. This scene here in verse 28 reminds me of the scenes in the movies where a disgruntled employee quits their job, right? They rip off their name tag, they chuck it in the trash. It's usually slow motion and the boss is yelling at them, but that's not really at all what happens here. It seems pretty basic. Levi and Jesus, and probably the disciples, who I would imagine are thinking, does Jesus know who he's talking to? He's asking Levi, this tax collector, this guy that takes more money than he should from us, to be a disciple? When it says that Levi began to follow him, he chose to be a disciple. But the very next thing that happens in this account, it's really cool. Verse 29, this is where we're going to spend most of our time. After he had got up and began to follow him, then Levi hosted a grand banquet for him, for Jesus, at his house. Now there was a large crowd of tax collectors and others who were guests with them, but the Pharisees and their scribes were complaining to his disciples, "Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners?" Okay, so here's what's going on. After this decision that Levi makes to leave his job as a tax collector, he hosts a banquet. Maybe it was a going away party, like we don't know, but he asks Jesus to be the guest of honor. He throws this party. But remember who Levi was. He was a tax collector. So who was he going to invite to this party? No one liked him. He didn't have a group. Well, he did of other tax collectors and sinners. In the us and them paradigm, tax collectors, they were often without a camp because they had one bumper sticker on their car. You know what it said? Traitor. They weren't accepted by the Jews because they worked for Rome, and they weren't accepted by Rome because they were Jewish. So what they did was they spent time with each other. That was their us. So Jesus is invited to be the guest of honor at this party of some of the most despised Jewish people in this town. And you know what Jesus says? Absolutely. I'm there. Levi, I would love to be the guest of honor at your party. This was a big deal. And we see that it's a big deal because there's two groups of people who are very unhappy about this, the Pharisees and the scribes, and they're complaining. Now remember who they were. These were the Jewish religious leaders. These were probably the same leaders that right before this were upset with Jesus for healing that paralyzed man and forgiving him of his sins. The Pharisees and the scribes, these were the people in the community that believed they were the righteous Jews, the ones that God was the most pleased with. They not only lived by the law, but they taught others how to live by the law too. They had a very small and elite group that was their us, and everyone else was them. So they asked the disciples this question: why do you eat with tax collectors and sinners, traitors to our people, corrupt snoops and informants, supporters of our oppression? What's really behind this question? Why was what Jesus and the disciples doing, why was that such a big deal? It seemed like something pretty little to us, right? Well, during that time and in that culture, attending certain parties made a statement. You only went to a party with those in your social status or those that you were kind of accepting. It wasn't the Facebook event that you reply maybe to today that you completely forget about later, okay? No, to eat with people, that was a sign of relational unity and acceptance. At these parties, you would share food, you'd share ideas, you'd share life. Pharisees and scribes, they did all that stuff with one another. They didn't engage with those that didn't have a high regard for the law. They looked at those people that Jesus was with contempt. But Jesus is at that party, eating with those very people. To do what Jesus did that day meant that he accepted them, that he wanted to know them. You only made that decision with people who were valuable to you. In that moment, Jesus is choosing to spend time with a group that the religious people in his community despised, who the religious people believed were beyond hope. Who are these people in our world today? Who are the people that we in the church would ask that same question? You ate with them? Is it people with a different sexual ethic? People on a certain side of the political spectrum? People who directly oppose the work of the church in our world today. Who are those people? Jesus had a very clear reason for why he was there at that party with those people. And he tells the Pharisees and scribes in the next verse, verse 31. Jesus replied to them, "It is not those who are healthy who need a doctor, but those who are sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance." So what was Jesus' answer? Did he say, "Gosh, you know what? You're right. What am I doing here? I shouldn't be here with them, tax collectors and sinners. Like, they aren't part of us. You're right." No, that wasn't his answer. He answered their question in a very simple way. He said, "Guys, healthy people, they don't need a doctor. Sick people do. And I am the one who can heal them. Have you ever had that feeling that you were in the wrong place at the wrong time? Maybe you find yourself in a situation with someone or with people and you think, I just don't think I should be here right now. And the thing with that is it's not often because of the situation that you're in, but it's because of what you think others are gonna think of you. What does this look like? Like, how are people gonna view me? Like, how's my reputation gonna be impacted? Like, are people gonna think that my very presence here is that I'm now one of them? We often think this and we regret the decisions we make to be with certain people or to be at certain places. But you know what? Jesus never struggled with that. He was never in the wrong place at the wrong time. Of every person who's ever lived, Jesus is the perfect example of what it meant to be in the right place at the right time with the right people. Over and over again, as we see in the Gospels, as we're going to see in this series, Jesus went to the people that his culture rejected. He went to the thems. When he goes to be with Levi and his friends, he's not concerned about what the religious leaders will think of him. That didn't matter. He was at that party with those people with a missional reason. It was to make them well. What Jesus says here, it connects so clearly with what we saw him do just before this in Luke chapter 5. Remember what happened? He brought physical healing and wholeness to the paralyzed man. But now he's in an environment to bring spiritual healing and wholeness to a group of people who are internally sick with sin. I don't know if you caught it, but there's a certain irony to Jesus' answer that he gives to the Pharisees that day. He tells them that sick people need a doctor, that he's not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. And from that answer, the Pharisees, you know what they would have thought? We are the righteous. God picked us. And the people at the party that you're with, they are the sinners. They are the sick people, like self-identified probably. The tax collectors knew who they were. But here's the thing, were the Pharisees righteous? Was that true? Were they seeing themselves clearly? No, they weren't. The reality is they were in a worse situation spiritually than those people at the party with Jesus because they were sick too. They needed a doctor and they were worse off because they were just as sick as those tax collectors and sinners, but they were blind to it. They didn't know. They were blind to their own spiritual sickness and need for Jesus. Being sick, it's a terrible thing. None of us like being sick. And I'll admit, I'm a terrible sick person. Like, I'm just a grouch. I don't like that that's true, but it is. But here's the thing. It's so much worse when you're sick and you don't know. When everything seems to be okay on the outside, but there's something else going on, something imperceptible that's breaking you down. And in that situation, it's hard because you don't know you're sick, so you don't seek help. But there comes a point when you realize it. When you realize I'm sick, I need to be made well. And that happens to us physically, but it happens to us spiritually too. Every one of us, regardless of what we believe, where we're from, what socioeconomic class we're in, every one of us are born spiritually sick. And the tough reality is we don't think we are. But there's always an ache that comes. That desire for something more, it comes to the surface, and we try to stop that ache in all these different ways. We focus on creating an identity for ourselves with success and with stuff and with relationships and with experiences, and we convince ourselves that just all of that's gonna stop this ache I feel. No matter how much we try and create ourselves or curate this self-image or surround ourselves with others in an us group, none of those things can make us well. None of them. Only Jesus, the great physician, only he can do that. That is why he came. In that passage, he says he's come to call sinners to repentance. Now, to repent, that just means to turn, to change our direction. So when a sinner repents, what they do is they choose to trust Jesus with their life, to turn from their lives of sin and to turn towards him in faith. And what happens is that when that happens, at that moment, we are given a new identity. And that identity, it's not one that we create ourselves or one that we achieve, but it's one that we simply receive with gratitude. That the moment you trust Christ and repent of your sin, you are fully accepted by God. As I see Jesus at this party in Luke chapter 5, like oddly, I'm reminded of those cars I see on the road with all the bumper stickers on it, how those cars are a picture of us. Our beliefs, our convictions, the ways that we live, and how the fruit of those things produces two groups, us and them. As we spent time here in this passage today, just looking at how Jesus lived, we see what he did really clearly. Jesus and his us always moved toward the thems. Jesus and his us always moved toward the thems. He and his disciples, they broke all the cultural and societal norms of their day. They were constantly ridiculed for who they were talking to and who they were spending their time with, because they went to those that their world, their culture rejected. Jesus lived his life on mission to reach those who are far from God. And you know who's in that group? Everyone. All of us. Jesus' desire is to take those who are far from him and restore their broken relationship with God. He did that by going to the cross for us, by dying for our sins, by conquering death in his resurrection. It's in that saving act that those who are far from God, you, me, we are offered forgiveness by faith in what Jesus did. In the Gospel of Mark, we see Jesus' mission summed up really clearly in one verse. Mark chapter 10, verse 45. It says this, even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus came to give his life for the lost. And when a lost person, a person who is sick with sin, when they're saved, what that means is they are made well. They're given two things. They're given a new identity and a new mission. That identity in that moment is that they are completely forgiven and loved. And their mission? Help others be the same. Help others come to Christ in faith and be made well. Jesus being at this party has really forced me to think about my own life, to think about those two groups that I live with, my us and my thems. And there's been some questions that I've been wrestling with this week that I just want to put before you, and I want you to wrestle with them too. Who are the people in your life that you view like the Pharisees viewed the tax collectors and sinners at that party? People that you are convinced are just beyond hope. People that you've just said, they're not going to respond to the gospel. I'm not going to spend my time with these people. Well, whoever those people are, you need to repent of that attitude because you're wrong. I'm wrong. If there are people in our lives that we will not go to with relationship, with our time, with the gospel, the issue is not with them. It is with us. Because Jesus' offer of forgiveness of sin and life in him, it is for everyone. And the way that people hear the truth is through those who have been made well, followers of Jesus. Whoever those people are in your life, I just want to ask you, repent. Ask God to change your heart, to have a heart that Jesus did for everyone. Who are those people in your life? The second question is this: what would it look like for us to live like Jesus did? Like, what did Jesus do here in these 5 verses? It wasn't confusing. It's actually really simple. The first thing he did, he sought out Levi. He started a relationship with him. He invited him to be a disciple at that moment. Not in a month, not in a year, not after he changed, not after he switched jobs, right then. Jesus invited him into a relationship. The second thing Jesus did was he said yes to an invitation to spend time with those who were unlike him. He went to a party that Levi hosted with other tax collectors and sinners. And don't miss the reality that's there. Those tax collectors and sinners, they wanted to be around Jesus. Do those people want to be around us today? Instead of condemnation, Jesus was compassionate with them. And the third thing that Jesus did was he accepted the cost. People in his community scorned him for going to that party. They questioned him. They ridiculed him. Two favorite names that the religious leaders had for Jesus during that time, guess what they were? Glutton and drunkard. We see that 2 chapters later in Luke chapter 7. You know why they called him that? Because that's who he spent his time with. Remember what Jesus did. He and his us moved toward the thems. What is one step you can do to do the same? Invite your neighbors over for dinner. Grab lunch with your coworker that you probably wouldn't choose to hang out with. Get to know someone on your sports team that's nothing like you. Do what Jesus did. Move toward the people that God has put in your life. As Christians, we've been made well by Jesus. We've experienced his grace. We've experienced forgiveness from sin and a new identity in him. And we have a choice in front of us. We can either commit all of our time and all of our energy into our us, into our groups of the people who think like we do, who live like we do, our people, or we can commit our time and our energy to being on mission with our us, to reach the thems. We can pray for and we can spend time in the lives of those who do not know Jesus, people who are just not like us. Those are the people Jesus went to. What will we choose? Remember what Jesus said. It is not those who are healthy who need a doctor, but those who are sick. I've not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. As repentant sinners who have been made well by Jesus, our great physician, my hope and my prayer is that our lives are committed to helping others be made well by him too. Let's pray. God, I'm just thankful that you have given us a clear written account of Jesus and his life and his ministry and who he is and how he lived. And God, for me, I'm just convicted and encouraged at the same time by this passage in Luke 5, how Jesus went to those in his life that people rejected, people scorned. And he went to them with an offer of forgiveness and compassion and love. And God, as we see that all throughout the gospel accounts, and as we're going to see that each and every week in this series, God, I pray that you help us have the heart of Jesus for our community, for our church, for those, God, that you have put around us. Help us be on mission to reach those who are far from you so that they can be made well by Jesus. It's in his name that we pray. Amen.
Wow, amen. Even as Pastor Tony was preaching, and especially at the end there, there are some people in my life even that came to mind that I think for myself, I'm gonna take the time this week to kind of map out and plan out who I can reach out to, people that think differently than me, and really just are on the opposite end of many spectrums than me. Because what I heard in that message was this heart of unity, this gospel-centered, Christ-centered unity. And I actually, this is not going to be on your screen, but I just want to read one verse from John chapter 17. This is one of my favorite chapters. It's where Jesus prays for unity. And he prays this and says this in verse 23. He says, I am in them and you are in me, so that they may be made completely one. He's praying to his Father, that the world may know you have sent me and have loved them as you have loved me. There's this idea of where the gospel moves us to reach across the aisle and to reach out to those who are different than us, those that, whether they know the gospel and are different than us, or they don't know the gospel and are different than us, where the heart of Christ is this heart of unity for us to move forward in that way with the gospel in hand, being anchored to the gospel as well. And that's something that I want to extend to you guys and to challenge, as Pastor Tony also challenged myself and you and our church family to do that. This gospel message is the very message that our church, that is at the heartbeat of our church. And it goes without saying that your continued generosity over the years has moved that mission forward, that vision forward. And I just want to say thank you so much for that continued generosity. And if you have, if it's your first time that you want to give to our church today and set up either a one-time gift or a recurring gift, you can go to rivchurch.com/give and set that up online there. Or you can text the number on your screen and set that up as well. Thank you again so much for your generosity. Your financial partnership with our church has really helped move that gospel message forward and has allowed us as a church to equip so many people, not only within the Lansing area, but beyond with the gospel message, and to pursue in such a divisive time that we are living in right now with the gospel message of Christ that unifies so many different people from so many different backgrounds. So thank you again so much for that. As we close out our service today, the Royal We is going to be playing one more song and leading us through worship, through song, with one more song here. So please join us in singing.
The sun sets free, oh, it's free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Who am I that the highest King would welcome me? I was lost, but He brought me in, His love for me. Yes, His love for me. Whom the sun sets free, oh, it's free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Free at last He has ransomed me, His grace runs deep. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. Yes, He died for me. Whom the Son sets free, oh, it's free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. And I'm a child of God, yes I am. Oh. chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. And I am who you say I am.
Well, as we close out our service here today, I just want to remind you that at every one of our venues, our 3 venues here at Riv, we have baptisms coming up next week, August 22nd. If you are interested in getting baptized, we'd love to dunk you. So you can go to rivchurch.com/baptism. For more information and to sign up there as well. And again, if you'd love to get connected with our church family, you can go to rivchurch.com/live, and you can find the different ways that you can stay connected with our family, church family, throughout this week. Thanks so much again for joining our service today, and hope you have a great week. Peace.